Good evening, and welcome to the September 26th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. I am so glad to see all of you in attendance. This is kind of a first for the people up here to have so many interested parties in. Can't talk any louder. This is it.
We're not hearing you.
Is the red dot on? Is the red dot on?
It's on.
Okay, you just maybe need to get closer.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Who says that? Can you hear me now?
Verizon,
Oh.
or whoever he is now.
Okay, so we'll start over again. So welcome to the September 26th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. I'm glad to see all of you here, all of you concerned citizens. That's what this is for, is to make your thoughts, opinions known to not only us, but to the council and the rest of the community. So first of all, on our agenda is approval of the minutes for September the 5th. And I need a motion to approve the minutes for September the 5th.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from September 5th for Plans and Policy Commission.
One second. Is there any discussion, any changes, anything that, I'm assuming you all read them, so no comments, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. So tonight we're going to break this meeting up into two sections. The first one is implementation of the Old Town Sub-Area Plan. We've already gone through the plan. We've already approved the amendments. This is just a implementation into the, to make sure that everything is in the books the way they're supposed to be. And so with that, we're going to call on Kristen to give us some update on exactly what we're talking about. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself?
I am going to. So for those of you I haven't met, I am Kristen Leeson. I'm a senior planner with the Development Services Department. The first one that we're talking about tonight, as Joan mentioned, are the Old Town Code amendments. So in 2018, we updated our Old Town Sub-Area Plan. As part of that plan, we adopted an action program. The action program included immediate actions from 2019 to 2020, short-term actions from 2021 to 2022, and longer-term actions from 2023 to 2030, to 2030. So we are in the process of implementing the immediate act, 6 of those immediate actions. These are land use code amendments, and when adopted in the plan, they were very specific amendments. So we are implementing those. This was posted, this came to the commission on August 8th, August 22nd, September 5th, and tonight. This has been posted on the city's website, and we sent letters to all property owners, 540 owners in Old Town. We have heard from 6 of those owners. The first action, and this is verbatim from the plan, is code revisions to reduce heights to 3 stories in the Cultural and Business District, to 3 stories in the Multifamily High District, which is on East Sunset Way only, so Front Street over, east, and reduce it to 2 stories, height in the 2 stories in the single-family duplex zone. And these zones are outlined here. So that's what we're proposing. The base height in the CBD was 45 feet. We're proposing to reduce it to 40 feet or 3 stories, whichever is lower. The base height in the multifamily high east of Sunset was 40 feet. We're proposing to keep it at 40 feet or 3 stories, whichever is lower. Maximum height, there is no longer a maximum height. The maximum height would be 40 feet, the same in the CBD. Multifamily medium, we added a new zone. It's multifamily medium Old Town only, so it's kind of a new zone. Their existing, what happened was we realized that they could still, their base height was 40 feet, but they could still go to 50 feet. Well, they're multifamily medium and multifamily high. It's supposed to be less dense than multifamily high, and allowing them to go to 50 feet would make it higher. So we have also said, or we are also proposing, that that would be 40 feet or 3 stories, whichever is lower. Lastly, single-family duplex, we are proposing to reduce that height from 30 feet to 25 feet or 2 stories, whichever is lower. Action number 3 was code revisions to increase impervious surface in the CBD from 85% to 95%. That is what is proposed in the code. And to increase impervious in the multifamily high district east of Sunset Way from 50% to 75%. Action number 4 was to add code revisions to require ground floor commercial on Front Street. We have added a footnote to the uses where that would be allowed and required, to uses that would be allowed and where that would be required. There was a request at our last meeting that did say to allow commercial/retail on Front Street. It was felt that that was a bit too restrictive, and so we just put commercial on Front Street. Action number 5, code revisions to allow small-scale retail in multifamily high. And there are a lot of, what this means really, it's East Sunset Way, and the intent was to allow standalone uses, small-scale standalone uses. There are some that are already there. They are grandfathered in, which means they were there before the code changed and no longer allowed them. You can do it, small-scale businesses within a mixed-use building. But this was preventing some people from doing commercial, where they wanted to be able to do commercial, and the task force really wanted to see more commercial. There was a task force in 2015. They wanted to see more commercial on Sunset. Action number 6 was to do code revisions to remove Old Town parcels as transfer of development receiving sites. So we have a transfer of development rights program that allows you to buy property rights from one property, which then becomes permanent open space, and transfer that development to receiving sites. Since the TDR program was adopted, we established the Central Issaquah plan. Central Issaquah around Gilman and Costco is where we want our growth to go. And it was heard loud and clear during the planning process for the plan update that nobody wants to see more density in Old Town. So we are proposing to remove the receiving sites from Old Town. The receiving sites are the ones here that are in, they're red, they're checked here, or they're striped here. Action 15 was to develop incentives that reduce parking requirements for neighborhood-oriented commercial projects. We defined neighborhood-oriented businesses as those with 10 or fewer locations throughout the U.S. that serve the daily and weekly needs of local residents, which would be Old Town. The intent or the idea is that people would be able, there would be more services where people could walk. Therefore, we could potentially reduce their parking requirements by 10%. We are proposing that. In addition to this was that we had an old map in here that was done in 1986 and referred to the downtown area, and a parking study, the parking study area, and was done for the local improvement district that was adopted in 1986. It no longer exists. So we removed that map and expanded a lot of the provisions and regulations and exemptions to all of the CBD and East Sunset Way. So that's all I have. We are asking council tonight to make a recommendation on these amendments. The proposed amendments are expected to go to City Council on December 10th for discussion. They won't take action then, and then they would go back to City Council on January 6th, where it is expected that they would take action.
So with that, I'm going to open a public hearing and ask if anybody would like to speak on this particular subject. I'll open the public meeting at 6:40 and ask if anybody is interested in making any comments to the changes proposed in the code amendments. If you are, would you come to the podium and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ellen Ray, and I have the property at 470 Sunset. And I have been very interested in developing that property for a mixed-use dental office. And with the housing situation the way it was, I was thinking that some of my building costs could be offset with putting the apartments above off of the front street here. And I'm okay with the amendments of having it just on Front Street now and taking the mixed use off of the side, but I am concerned with the 4,000 square foot limiting to the business amendment. Is that something that it's because of the square footage and the parking requirements? Can I ask questions, or I'm just
This is
making-
just public comments.
So it's just public comment. I will keep a record of the questions, and we will get them
I
answered.
love, and I know there's other people that are opposed to the 4-story buildings, but I think the problem that we have in Issaquah is parking. And I think parking's going to be essential for all the businesses. And in the neighborhood, my lot is all filled with the business parking already, and it's a home. And if I want to turn it into an office, a 4,000 square foot office, how will I ensure that the parking spaces are enough? And I'm really, the 4,000 square foot building, to build it and the cost of it, to have additional resources for parking underneath the building. I really like the buildings that are here, and I think the landscaping as it grows fills in and it looks nice. And I think that we should look at parking as a whole with the businesses and maximize the land use in that area. And I think for growth and development, I would love to have with the dental office, I think that we need to incorporate other things into dental world. There's breathing issues, and there's so many specialists that need to be involved, and I'd like to have more than one business. I don't know everything there is to know about dentistry, and I'd like to have it limited. I don't like the idea of having it limited to just the scope of my field. I'd like to have a few more practices in there that could offset this cost, and to have a little larger practice for that reason, to contribute back, because I think we're so close to the schools within walking distance and things like that. I'd like to have the opportunity to expand on that, because there's nothing available for addressing the kids' health care that close and nearby, and I'd like to be more open with the community and being able to address the needs of the children, but we can't grow and develop alone. I need the help of other people in just a small little area, and I think with the scope of the 4,000 square foot limiting and different things, I worry that the parking issues and everything else, I would like to see the businesses continue to grow through here, because it's a front street that leads to a freeway, and I think those are meant for businesses. I don't think they're meant for homes along that street. That's my concern.
Thank you. I forgot to say that there's a limit of, just like on the city council, a 5-minute limit. So if you take that into consideration, I know that you wanted to make some comments. Please go up, introduce yourself.
Tall. Hi, my name's Sue Foss, and I own the property that's in the receiving zone at 120 First Avenue. So, but actually the thing I want to talk about is not the loss possibly of some value in the property, but the environmental concerns I have about increased impervious surfaces. I was really surprised about that, because I think Issaquah is better than that, to be paving everything. And that those open spaces that could transfer some development rights, I think they should be preserved so the water can soak into the ground. I mean, our fish are running right now. There's a storm drain right by my office, and after a heavy rain, I go out there and there's trash, and it's falling through the cracks. And I could see a day when Issaquah could be underwater because of these storm drains failing. With our weather changing, I just wonder if it just doesn't seem like a good thing. I'm really concerned, more concerned than about the value of my building. because I think highest and best use means more than money. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment? I know you all should have been signed up, but I think that
Good evening, council and guests here. My name is Ryan Yee. My wife and I own the property at 245 East Sunset Way. We are in the area and are one of those houses. We have operated an acupuncture and massage and my construction business out of this property for the last 10 years. We are currently just looking at development to convert into a office and residence above. Now, I'm going to share some math with you. Hopefully you can follow along with me. I'll try and stay within 5 minutes. We currently have a 6,000 square foot property. Under current rules, we can only build on 50%. That's 3,000 square foot. Of that, for every 200 square feet of office space, we are currently required to provide 1 parking space. If we have a residence, for 1 residence, we must also include 2 parking spaces. If we were to fit 9 parking spaces, that is 7 parking spaces for the business and 2 for the residents, we would approximately have 400 square feet to build an office in. Okay. Now, impervious surface or not, the increase to 75% allows me to use 4,000 of that 6,000 square foot to build on. And hopefully, in this changes that we're considering, we're also considering raising the 200 square foot per office space required to 1 parking space to maybe 400 or 600 square feet to require only 1 parking space. Because as we increase to 75%, if we don't change that, I'm not improving or enlarging any of my office. All I'm doing is adding parking because I can't make an office bigger. So on those particular areas, I hope that we're looking at changing that and also including a provision that allows us to do tandem parking, since that if we're at the office, our clients can actually park in back of us. And that is not going to be a revision or a waiver request, but something added to the amendment that allows us, because all of these offices are accessed primarily from the alley and the back side and not a driveway on Sunset. So this change is a matter of great importance. We're revising our plans right now just because we received this letter, changing things with the architect and are kind of on hold. I would like to also consider that we can do some sort of water retention storage on site to actually collect the rainwater and use it to our water features, our pond or waterfall, or for that matter, just watering our plants. And those things would all be helpful in consideration. So bear that in mind in the math of it, that our building code requirements are also really restrictive, so that when we go ahead and look at what an impervious surface is, how it impacts us to be able to, 1, be able to build an office for that matter. And I think the look of being able to go back and say an Old Town Issaquah feel, it's nice to be able to have a business and still live above it and not have to drive to an office every day. Thank you.
thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment?
Hi, my name is Robert Ben Susan. I am a property manager with Azos Commercial Properties, and we manage the downtown Issaquah Plaza property across the street. And we are one of the few developable sites in downtown Issaquah. I guess I want to urge the council not to change anything. It's already fairly restrictive as it is. And if you put more limitations on development, there will be no changes. There will be the same old property that you see currently in our case and in several other cases. And if people want to see new, innovative architecture, something that would bring more interesting types of tenants to downtown and more residential to downtown, limiting the development is not the way to do it. And if you look around at all the other suburbs around in Greater Seattle, and you'll see that all of them are seeing development, and certainly a little higher than what was currently allowed for in downtown Issaquah, and they're thriving. And we hope that you will leave things as they are and let some opportunity for development continue, and still keep downtown a wonderful place, downtown Issaquah, with its special feel and old town. We, if you look at our building, are not a historical or architectural anything that downtown Issaquah is famous for. And if a developer were to come in, they would be required to come in with a plan and design that would fit with downtown and make it a nicer place for everyone. And I hope the council will think hard about not changing and allowing more opportunity for other developers and for growth that isn't asking, we're not asking for anything higher, we're just asking to leave it as it is to allow for some things to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a Cynthia? Did you want to make a comment? Okay. Does anybody else want to make a comment? Does anybody else want to make a comment? So I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:53 and open it up for discussion in the, I appreciate saying council, but we are not the council, we're just a committee. So we haven't been, given our updates here. So is there any comments that you'd like to make?
I wanted to commend you guys from hearing some comments. We had a lot of discussion about retail, and it looks like you guys have made some amendments that, while didn't necessarily fit with the original design that we had all kind of envisioned as we've talked about it over the last couple of years. I think it's a really nice balance of trying to draw business, trying to balance the residential without necessarily being so confining to property owners. So as we've gone through these meetings, I think staff has heard that, and to me, the revisions tonight are reflecting that, and so I wanted to say thank you for that. It's a journey. I think we've all come along little bit by little bit, and so I think where it's rested right now is a good compromise to kind of advance us further and see where we get.
Anybody else? Randy?
No.
No? I want to say I appreciate the people that spoke, and they're concerned about their businesses and that they want to grow. But I know that we've talked about these amendments for a long time. We've toured the city, and I think we have a tendency to not to look at the big picture and say, wouldn't it be nice to have a 2-story here and a 3-story here, and we kind of forget about the people who are already there and have to make their living and their plans based on what their property allows them to do. So I have some questions and concerns. I would like to find a way to discuss with these property owners a little bit more on what they can do based on the amendments that are proposed, how they can actually be made to be able to work around making sure that they have some way to grow their businesses. So with that, we need to vote on this tonight.
Possible.
Are you ready to vote, or do you want to continue this on for more discussion, or what would you like to do? Robin?
So I have a question. I think some of these comments were ones that have been echoed some of our discussions. You mentioned that you'd like to discuss more with some of the presenters, their concerns. So how do you see, if we vote tonight, how do you see wrapping those discussions and the responses of the city to these individuals? How do you see that, how does that work with us voting tonight or not, or delaying a vote?
I don't know, I just thought of this.
No, I concur with your sentiments.
I would think that, we've spent a long time on these amendments and these codes. And I would think that, they're all for the betterment of the city. I think it will look good when it's done, but I would hope that the city would spend more time with especially the 3 or 4 people that made comments tonight, to help them work around, instead of just saying only 2,000 square feet or 4,000 square feet, some way to incorporate and allow them to grow their business.
Right, and I think if anybody who spoke tonight wants to contact me, I can always set up a meeting with a current planner who does numbers better than I do, and we can talk about it. And, every comment that's made here, it's part of the record, it goes to city council as well, so city council will consider their comments too.
So since the council has not voted on this, there is still time to make some changes. So I would suggest that the 4 of you, sit down and make sure you have a private interview with the city staff and see how you can work this out. We want things to be done right. We also want businesses to grow, and if there's, for some reason, we haven't really thought enough about a specific amendment, maybe there can be some wiggle room or little changes to enable you to promote your businesses. So with that, I know the city, the city staff. Kristen is willing to set up meetings with planners for you, so I hope you take advantage of that and see if we can't work around making sure everybody is happy, because that's what we want. We want the people that are in the city to grow their business. We want people who live in the city to be able to use those businesses, and if they can't expand, and we're expanding the city for so many people, we need services to provide for these people. So I hope that works out. So with that, we still have to vote on our recommendation to send these amendments forward to the City Council for review. So I need a motion to approve the...
Joan, you said you had some questions. Would you like to vote on these individually or as a package?
I don't have any specific questions. I just concerns, maybe, instead of questions.
So do you want to voice those before we offer?
I think I have.
Okay, so do we want these individually then? We can do them by amendment and vote rather than doing them as a package. We can send a partial recommendation if we feel that not everybody's on board with voting for these all as a package.
I haven't heard any other real discussion on this, so I'm waiting for what you guys would like to do. Anybody?
I have no changes that I'd like to see in the amendments as they are written and as we have discussed since
Okay,
July.
so we have a motion on the floor. I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, we're going to forward them to the City Council for review.
Who
Made the motion.
Oh, okay.
Who did the second? I'm sorry, I didn't get the second.
Randy and Rob?
Robin, I think, did the second.
Robin seconded it,
I
right?
don't know who was
And
first.
Bill made the motion.
You made the motion?
Bill.
You made the motion and you seconded. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, we just all missed it.
Speak up, sorry.
Now I'm worried, did he really make a motion or not? Okay, so with that, do you have a presentation to be made for our next,
And was the vote unanimous? The vote was
before the
unanimous?
public hearing on the proposed amendments to Issaquah Comprehensive Plan and zoning map, which I think all of you are here to discuss. So, Kristen? Kristen is
I'll
going to
speak
make
for her. I'm about to present. So I'm still Kristen Leeson, city planner with the Development Services Department. And oh wait, I've got to open the right presentation. Let me see. Okay, so this discussion or deliberation are about our proposed 2019 community facilities redesignations and rezones. This is something that we do pretty much every year whenever any public entity, the city, the school district, a fire, anybody, a public entity acquires public land. This is what we do. We propose to rezone it to a community facilities land use designation. And the purpose of this is to identify publicly owned land that is going to be used for public purpose. So that's just a really long definition that says what I said, but I said it faster. Within the community facilities land use designations, there are 3 zoning designations. The first is community facilities open space. Community facilities open space is intended for passive uses, not intensive uses, permanent open space, passive trails, interpretive trails. Another one is community facilities recreation. Community facilities recreation allows for slightly higher intensive uses such as recreational parks, baseball fields, interpretive trails, concession stands as accessory uses to the baseball fields. The last one that we have is the most intensive of the community facilities, and it's community facilities. This allows for things like our community center, government buildings, schools, libraries, daycares. That's what that's for. So our notification for this was advertised in the Issaquah Reporter. Letters were sent out to all property owners within 300 feet of each of these sites, so there were 930 letters sent out, and it was posted on the city's website. I'm going to start I'm headed north, and then I'll go north, south, west, east. Parcels 1 through 3 are located up on 228th. They're the intended use, they've been purchased by the school district, Issaquah School District, and their intended use is to put future schools on this site. The existing land use designation is low-density residential. The proposed, as with all of these, land use designation is community facilities. The existing zoning is single-family small lot, and the proposed zoning is community facilities. So I have all parcels 4 through 10 on here because 4 and then 6 through 10 were included in the original letter that went out. Those will now be addressed at a later date once some more the planning process has been done for these parcels. However, number 5 is still being discussed. It was purchased by King County and is intended for trails to connect up to the other Cougar Mountain trails that are there. It is low-density residential land use designation currently. It is being proposed as its existing zoning is single-family estates. Its proposed zoning is community facilities open space. Parcel 11 is, actually I'm going to scoot back. I did not say where these are. These are just north of Tallis along Newport Way is where these parcels are located. And this area here is all owned by King County, or this area here, I should say. Parcel 11 is located in the Tallis area, just off of SR 900. Again, this is a parcel that was purchased by the school district. It is proposed for a future school. Its existing land use is retail. Its existing zoning is office. Its proposed zoning is community facilities. Parcels 12 and 13, this is where our new 62nd Street is located for the most part. So on this part, you have the roundabout and part of 62nd. And on this southeast corner, 62nd runs down through here and over here. The rest of this site is used for permanent open space as mitigation for the road. The existing land use designation is mixed use. The existing zoning is mixed use Central Issaquah. And the proposed zoning is community facilities, and this is because there's already a road here. The last one is parcel 14. This was acquired by the city, and it was acquired as part of the future Front Street Park system. There are several parcels that have been purchased directly to the west and north of this one. The city likes to try and purchase lands adjacent to the creek. The existing land use designation is low-density residential. The existing zoning is single-family small lot. The proposed zoning is community facilities recreation. That's all I have, very short. This public hearing will actually be continued to October 10th as part of the Comprehensive Plan Amendments public hearing. On November 12th, it would go to City Council for a study session where they would not take action. And then on December 2nd, it would go with all the Comprehensive Plan Amendments to Council for action.
For potential action.
Potential action, correct.
So this could go on for a while.
Good, yes.
So with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing in regard to the rezone. And I know that there's a list of people who would like to make public comment. The committee did get all of the comments that many of you, the committee did get the comments that were provided by many of you, and so we've all read them and understand them. But we're going to start with, I know there's a lot of people that would like to speak tonight, so we're going to start with Karen Stevens.
Joan, may I make one comment before we start? I just wanted to note that tonight's discussion, deliberation is about the zoning, and that, yes, there will be a site plan that comes through eventually. An application has not been submitted, and that goes through a different public process.
I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, sorry.
This is just the rezoning of this property. It is not any site plan. I know that some of you have looked online and saw the site plan. That is not what it's going to be. It's a proposal. That proposal has not gone to the city to get any permits. So there is going to be a lot of changes in regard to exactly where the buildings are placed. Understanding that the school district needs land to build, and they are required to stay within the city limits to build new schools. So they are very limited to what areas, how much land is available for them to use. So with that,
I have my comments here, and I'll pass them out. And it has to do with the zoning.
okay. If you would go to the microphone and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Okay, my name is Karen Stevens, and I'm a retired nurse, University of Washington, and a state nurse working over 20 years in long-term care and residential services involving Title 18 and 19, Medicare and Medicaid. So I'm familiar with problems of senior citizens. In response to the proposed change in the Issaquah comprehensive plan for the city church property on 228th, objections include but are not limited to the following issues. 1, location issues. 2 schools, including the proposed high school, with possibly 2,000 students and staff will be forced into a confined area in the midst of a community of more than 2,000 senior citizens located in the following. Group A is Providence Point Retirement Community, including Forest Village, which has its entrance opposite Providence Point on Southeast 43rd Way at the top of the hill. B is Bellwood Retirement Community with property existing off of 228th Avenue Southeast. C, Providence Marionwood Nursing Home, long-term care facility, Title 1819 with skilled nursing residents, which exits onto 228th. And I understand there's going to be some more building to expand that. Spiritwood at Pine Lake is assisted living and another retirement community village being built on the grounds existing off 228th. And excuse me, I erred, it's they that are expanding, not Marionwood. These senior communities have been situated in a serene woodland setting, thanks to the sale stipulations by the original owners that the land be used to benefit the elderly, giving them ready access to emergency response services nearby, which visit these properties sometimes as often as 3 times daily. Traffic increases related to the proposed schools would negatively impact emergency responses, and in the event of a disaster, future students and staff could be trapped in a pocket with only one main exit. Zoning should not allow this to happen. Number 2, traffic issues. Southeast 43rd Way is an S-curved 2-way road covered with untended potholes and with a steep grade of about 10 degrees. In the winter, it is often icy, with cars being abandoned on the sides, especially in heavy snow, and drivers in need of rescue. 228 Southeast, the exit entrance of the school area already is backed up throughout the day in mornings, afternoons, and evenings by commuters and school traffic to and from the 5 schools already located on 228th Southeast. More school buses and teenage drivers will only exacerbate the congestion and increase the danger of accidents and interference with emergency responses. Number 3, environmental issues. Power demands of the proposed schools and their activity fields would negatively impact local residents of the nursing homes and other facilities. Stadium lighting and noise will also interfere with the neighboring residents' need for sleep and rest. Perhaps the most damaging impacts, however, will be the increase of air pollution excuse me, caused by fuel emissions from cars, delivery trucks, buses, heating and air conditioning of the facilities. The removal of the beautiful trees will also negatively affect air quality. Residents of senior communities are encouraged to walk, bike, and exercise outside to maintain stamina and mobility. Yet another school, Banu, located on 228 Southeast, may make outdoor activities for seniors a health threat rather than a benefit. And of course, the litter will increase, thus attracting mice, rats, raccoons, and other foraging creatures. Additionally, an increased demand on sewer lines will possibly create more runoff and hillside deterioration from heavy trenching.
It's been 5
In conclusion,
minutes.
this is a zoned residential area which has been providing a quiet, fairly serene environment for retirement years of senior citizens. Such a disruption in all areas of our lives will be deleterious to our health and well-being. Imposition of this plan will defeat the purpose of residential zoning law, a dereliction of duty by the Issaquah City Council Planning Commission. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a side note, my mom was one of the first people who lived in Providence Point. Is Susan Forbes?
Can I just ask a point of clarification?
Go ahead.
You said the school district has to build within the city, but the school district covers a broad area.
Well, keep that thought. I thought it was just a small area that you were talking about, but that encompasses a lot of stuff. So why don't you come to the microphone and ask the question? Not now.
No, I understand.
Yes, because once I'm up here, I don't leave. Yes, I am.
I've watched right here, 5 minutes.
Yes, good. I won't need that much. I know it's about zoning, and I know it's in the beginning. I think it's in the beginning process of deciding what's going to happen, but what has stuck with me for about a month now is I was visiting somebody in the Highlander, which is a tall building in Highland Village, and she is on the top floor. From her many windows in her condo, she has a clear view of that and almost that entire property. And it would take giant sequoias a couple hundred years to grow tall enough to help with some of the noise and also the visual impact on the people that live in that building. So coming from my perspective, I'm really worried about having a school there and the noise that may come and probably will come from football games and other activities, tennis and softball, and also the lighting situation for those folks who are right on the edge of the property. There just doesn't seem to be enough buffer for them to maintain their sense of peace and quietness. So as you're thinking through the process, and if anybody ever wants to go up to the Highlander, to the 3rd floor and see exactly what I'm talking about, you have my name and phone number, and I will make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Roberta Brown.
I'll make this quick as well. Now that I know that this is uniquely about rezoning, not about interior facilities. So I have a little reorganization here to do. First of all, in terms of even using it for a school, just one comment. I've been sort of involved since the beginning with this. I, in fact, showed up, well, the only one I think here, to the original hearings about whether to tear down the building or whether to preserve it, including the stained glass windows and all that. So my first question, in that process, I learned that, in fact, many of the students, and I may be wrong about this, but many of the students who are destined for the new school will be coming from down in the valley, near I-5, all that area, and need to be bused up. Now, if that's correct, it's going to be a disaster in terms of traffic, in terms of the poor students, and in terms of our living in the 21st century with the global crises of warming. So, I think there's still, I realize it's bought, it's a done deal, but if there's any way we could reconsider building down by the freeway where the students will be, which will be much more practical, it would be great. So that said, moving on to, okay, it's going to happen, I think a possibility to consider, again, because we are living in the 21st century, not the 1950s, could we consider, in terms of the zoning, to have some of the parcels zoned as recreation or open space instead of just facilities? My reason for this, again, is environmental primarily, and also I'm thinking of the kids, especially the grade school kids who will be there. If you notice the footprint for that, I have certain words, stadium is as big as the school, if not bigger. And football is going to be a bygone sport in 20 years. Most parents are not allowing their boys, note you, to turn out for football anymore. And the other sports that are gender neutral don't need a stadium. We've already got one up the street at the Skyline. So, maybe the zoning could be reconfigured to have some area for recreation, open space. We could have a great synergistic relationship with all of us old retired folks in terms of nature trails, lots of trees, and so forth. So last comment, the trees. Yes, indeed. Those trees are a sponge and absorbent of carbon for miles and miles around, including Front Street. I hate to say this, it spreads. They need to be preserved as much as possible, and what isn't preserved, I'd like to see offset. Are there any plans to offset that, again, in terms of permeable parking, sod roofs, solar paneling? But that gets into the school itself, so I won't touch on that. But finally, in terms of rezoning, where does the environmental impact study fit in? If it's for facilities rather than residential, is that a different environmental study? And I'm very concerned knowing that what was torn down was a half-century-old concrete building full of asbestos. Those of us from the Y down there know that. As well, I do believe, is some PCBs. Is there going to be an absolutely thorough environmental study, possibly some toxic cleanup? I think this is absolutely essential, especially if young children are going to be put there, and there will be inevitable runoff down to the lake. So those are my questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Francie? Ito? Peto? Ito.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Yes, my name is Francie Pito, and I do live in Providence Point with my friends here. Some of the comments I have already been addressed, so I won't repeat those. I'll just maybe cheer for them. But the life for those of us at Providence Point, if we think back 35 years at least that this community has existed, those of us that live there we've paid our dues, we've supported the community, paid our taxes, and helped grow the businesses in the valley floor, some now on the plateau. And it feels, I'm addressing this to the school issue, and I'll make it really quick, but it seems punitive to me to leapfrog over two other, at least, if not, it depends on how you read the designations, from the least impactful to small homes, moving totally over the two middle into the most invasive kind of facility, invasive kind of designation to designate a facility. Now, of course, a facility can be a community center, a place where kids can come after school because they don't have parents at home when school is out. They need to be somewhere. A lot of them go to the library. And so if there was a community center designated up on the hill, that would be great. But a high school, in terms of the whole list of high schools that are already on 228th, 5, I believe, schools on 228th, between where Southeast 43rd turns into 228th all the way down to Safeway, that way. So that's a concern. The Growth Planning Commission, you have a responsibility, I believe, to assist our city in making a plan that looks out to the future and not just 5-10 years. And as part of that, we know that if we allow all of the developments that have been built, all the homes in the Highlands and all along the 228th corridor, those homes generate kids. So when you Providence Point doesn't generate that many kids, I have to say. We're the exception. But all those homes have kids, you know, and so to now say, well, we have to have a place for those kids to go to school, I think that now and in the future, the plan needs to be build homes and build schools. So I would like to see this land used now for a community center, if it's adopted to be in the designation of facilities, that we have a community center, open space, trails, leave a little place in Sammamish, on the Sammamish Plateau in Issaquah, where people can get some restful environmental time. Thank you.
Ellen, Ray?
Sorry, that was for the prior one. I sent it for the wrong one.
Oh, okay. Sue Foss? That's you, okay. I thought that putting out this slip like this would cause confusion to me. Russ Miller?
I didn't expect to speak today. I didn't check the box. But I live in Forest Village and Providence Point. And along with many of my neighbors, I think we're probably pretty much in agreement about concerns of the noise. I question the schools as well. To me, it seems a little insane to have a elementary school as well as a high school in the same area. I'd like to see maybe some modifications on that, possibly one, but not two. I think we need to take some of that space, and I'm in agreement with many of my neighbors as far as trees, runoff, pollution, all the above. And so I would just humbly ask that you consider a better use of this property. Thank you.
Connie Edwards? You're not signed up to speak, but did you want to speak? Well, speak.
I'm not on the list. I'm Margaret Warner. I live in Garden Village and Providence Point. I think you're building lots and lots and lots of houses up in the Highland. There's lots of room up there. Is that not city property? You can't build schools up there?
I don't think there's
near the high school, near the hospital. There's lots of new homes going in there. And what are you going to do with those kids? Ship them off to some other district? We're getting too many houses and not enough schools. You need to think about that before you build all these houses.
Is Alan here? I saw him a few minutes ago. Alan Flintoff? He's not here. Robert Ben, I can't read it, Ben S-A-S-S-E-N?
Ben Susan, he left.
He left? Kelsey Schleck?
Casey Schleck.
Casey? You left it, so.
Thanks. They're all Old Town.
John McDuff? Nope. Would anybody else that's not signed up like to?
Isn't that gentleman here who said also that he had some
Well,
questions?
we'll get there. State your name, please.
Hi, I'm Mary Doratus, and I live in Washington Village. I've been a resident there for a little over 3 years. I moved as soon as I turned 55 so that I could move into a place that had a free pool. I thought this would be about site plan as well, so I kind of threw some comments together. If you'd be patient with me, I'd appreciate it. There are about 1,300 residents in Providence Point. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. Of those, about 1/3 live in the bordering, actually border the proposed school property. So about 500 or so. And those are 3 of the villages that are affected. And those aren't the only people that care about this. There are actually people here from Forest Village, which is across the street, isn't even anywhere near the proposed school. Given the events of the past week, it seems that a lot of teenagers around the globe are thinking more about the future than us adults. And I hope you keep that in mind when you're considering how to rezone this property. Maybe what we as a community, and community I mean adults and kids, because the kids are very important as well, even to us senior citizens. Maybe what we need is just a smaller footprint. The district needs school, the residents need schools. It's going to happen. The question is how. There are 3 parcels. Maybe the center parcel could be scaled down, a scaled down version, however that wants to happen. But there are 3 parcels, so it seems like you have a lot of opportunity there. And personally, because I border along the property, I'm really going to miss the owl that hoots at night and probably does a lot of hunting there as well. So bottom line is, I think all of us, definitely all of us here, and everybody at Providence Point would really appreciate that you keep us in mind. That's the Planning Commission, of course, the school district, the city council, as you go forward with this project. Thank you.
Would you please take this over there so they can sign up? So you have a record of, if you would like to speak.
You want, I didn't get her name.
Oh, I see.
And then, sir. Okay.
Hello, my name is Sue Martins, and my husband and I live in Providence Point. We're also the grandparents of a set of twins who currently go to an elementary school just over the border in Sammamish, but it is the Issaquah School District. And we pick them up every afternoon. It takes us 40 minutes from the time we are approaching their school in our car to get into the line, to wait to even enter the school property, and then to go around and find a parking spot, and then sit for a few minutes until the children are let loose, and then I get out of the car and jump up to meet them, bring them back to the car, and then we wait again for some of the cars to clear out. And then, of course, you can only make a right-hand turn because of safety and the traffic and everything. And then we get them home. So this takes anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes. And that's just an elementary school. And there's just one school. So one of the questions I have that we need to get from this entity who is making this proposal for us. Why 2 schools on the same property? I mentioned 9-year-old twins, beautiful little girls. And now we're going to have a bunch of teenagers in cars. What the heck are we thinking about? I just can't believe we're, anyway. That's some of my traffic issues. But also, we also know that down the road onto 43rd, they're now building an apartment complex. So you're not only going to solve any kind of problems in the future, you're going to have double the amount of traffic coming and going on 228th. And then as far as our environmental issues, I wonder what's going to happen to our little family of deer that I watch every chance I can get that they're running around. We're not taking that. We keep saying environment, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I know I'm afraid, that a bear might get me if I'm out there walking, but I also like the idea that we're so wild still, there could possibly be a bear. And I just had a couple other concerns. It's already been mentioned that there's not much of a buffer. I've seen 2 possible plans, and it doesn't look like there's any buffer, as it looks like the trees are going to. So anyway, I just wanted to get those points across. I know everybody else has made much better points, but these were just emotional ones for me because I feel so close to it. And I love being in Providence Point and all the hikes and walks I can take. Thank you.
I know the board is there somewhere, but I'd really appreciate if you would sign in just so that the staff knows to contact you. It's behind you, I think.
My name's Harry Stouffer. Appreciate the opportunity to say a few words, but could I first get that clarification that if the school district covers broad areas beyond the city, why must it build within the city?
According to growth management rules, they have to be in the city.
Within the urban growth line.
I will get that answered for you.
I just thought, that statement probably shouldn't be in the record if it's not exactly accurate.
It is.
It's within the urban growth line.
It's right.
So it can't be in the rural area. It has to be in the urban area, which would be our city limits and any area that's either within a city or within a potential annexation area.
Okay, so there would be areas outside the limits of the city of Issaquah where they could put the schools.
Right, like in Sammamish or Renton or places, but they couldn't be out in the rural area like Tiger Mountain. They couldn't be out in
Well, I appreciate that. But I mean, I think a lot of well-made points, or a lot of points were well-made here tonight. I think the concern is that this is greased, that the school district was going to condemn the property through eminent domain if they weren't able to buy it, so they bought it. And now it appears that they believe that they can just go ahead and develop it in any way that they want to develop it. And I know that the point has been made here that this is not about the site plan, but it's about the zoning. But getting the zoning right is the thing that should be accomplished first. And if it's turned into a zone for schools, they're going to be rolling right along, have the momentum, and say, well, it's zoned for schools, we're going to build schools. So I just ask everyone to keep open minds and realize that this site is a very bad site for 2 schools, a football stadium, parking garage, tennis courts, baseball fields, and all the rest. Thank you.
I don't know what happened to the board.
It's right there, front row.
evening. I'm Richard Aramburu. I'm an attorney representing the Providence Point Umbrella Association. I don't want to take a lot of your time tonight because we're going to be back in front of you on October 10 with a more thorough presentation, but I want to respectfully correct, two misunderstandings that I think have been presented tonight. First of those is when you consider a comp plan change and zoning for a particular use, you can't avoid the ramifications, zoning ramifications, environmental ramifications of what's going to be put on the property. So you've got to consider that. The record is replete with plans and other materials about what the district wants to do with this property, which seems to be, and we'll demonstrate, is clearly excessive. The second point is this is a comp plan change and a rezone. It's approached by you as any comp plan and rezone change would be. Does it meet the standards of the city? Does it qualify for impacts or lack of impacts to adjacent properties? The school district is not given particular credence, or a free ride because they're the school district. You have to keep within your rules as the city always has. The second point to be made, and we'll make this point later on, this property doesn't qualify for use as schools. It's probably the last place you'd want to put one school, much less two schools. We'll talk about those factors later, but it shares a 3,100-foot boundary with a residential area. It has severe limitations on access, again, a disqualifying factor, and it's in the midst of one of the worst traffic situations in Western Washington, in Sammamish and in Issaquah, along 228th and 43rd. So I want to keep it short tonight, introduce myself. Thank you all for listening to Providence Point people and myself. We'll be back with more information for you on the 10th of October. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment?
My name is Tom Mullins, and I am the Capital Projects Director for the Issaquah School District. Thank you for your consideration of the district's request to redesignate and rezone the properties recently acquired by the district for new schools. School sites are needed for school facilities approved by our voters as part of the 2016 bond program. Recent and continuing robust enrollment growth throughout the district requires the construction of new schools for our community. All projects are on critical timeline to address capacity challenges within our existing schools. We have worked hard over the last 3 years to identify and acquire sites and locations near enrollment growth and on land feasible for school construction. City of Issaquah's comprehensive plan and zoning regulations permit the construction of new schools only on parcels designated and zoned as CFF. For this reason, the current proposal is the first step in the land use process for moving forward with school projects. The request relates only to the underlying land use designation, is not specific to project design on the properties. We understand that the city does have pre-application conceptual plans posted on the development page website. These documents, submitted as part of the pre-application process, are nowhere near our final decision or proposal for city permit review. They are simply conceptual plans. When it moves forward beyond conceptual planning and through the city's permit process, the district will consider, as required by the CFF zoning, design measures to carefully incorporate the school into the surrounding neighborhood. The district appreciates your thoughtful consideration of this request and appreciates the continuing opportunity to partner with the City of Issaquah and the use of public property and deliver a quality education to our shared constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. I do appreciate you being here. I was going to request someone from the school district be here on the 10th to answer any questions or concerns that, and I assume you are going to be here, so. Absolutely. Yes. So anybody else want to make a comment? Anybody else? Going once? I'm going to close the public hearing. What? I'm not going to close the public hearing. It's going to be continued till October the 10th. I even wrote that down.
And
3 times.
Say it has to be the place to Pickering Room, City Hall Northwest.
So it will not be here. It will be in the Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest by Holiday Inn.
Say that again?
It will be at the Pickering Room next to Holiday Inn, City Hall Northwest. You all know where that is? You know where Holiday Inn is? It's right next to it. It's the building right next to the Holiday Inn. Okay, so on the 10th at 6:30. Any comments that you want to make before?
Yes, I just wanted to, first off, to tell you how much we appreciate your being here. This is an example of people being able to address their municipal government. You'd be amazed at how many of our meetings we have and how many city meetings go on with nobody showing up from the public to speak. So the fact that you're here is a reinforcement of the basic tenets of American democratic experience, and we appreciate it very much. I would like to point out again, as was made earlier, kind of an expectation management thing here. The Planning Policy Commission does just that. We make recommendations to the mayor. And today's meeting and next week's, or on the October 10th meeting, is about zoning. It is not about what happens on the land if and when the zoning takes place. That's an entirely different process. And I would encourage you to continue to do what you're doing here tonight. There will be a series of meetings, there will be a series of presentations beyond the Planning Policy Commission that will involve the Development Commission, that will involve the City Council, will involve committees of the City Council, that will affect what happens on this parcel. And the more public input those entities get, the more it will reflect your, in my personal opinion, your legitimate concerns. So thank you very much for being here tonight, and please continue to follow the process and take advantage of the public hearings to influence your elected representatives. Thank you.
Well said.
So, well said.
Anybody else?
I would like to understand, in line with some of the comments here, but independent of those, I would like to understand, as we move forward with this deliberation, how a rezoning process and a comp plan change is intertwined with an EIS and with tree management and the other issues, transportation issues that have been addressed here, or at least questioned, and which seem to me integral to the whole process, not just zoning, but then, of course, site development. So can I understand that better, please?
Sure, and Randy alluded to it a little bit. We're the policy commission, and so we do the overarching piece on what the land use designation and the zoning would be for. And remember, these aren't just any parcels in the list that you looked at today. These are owned by a public entity to be used for public purpose. So they're different than if it's a housing development, a commercial development. They're sort of in a different category. They're publicly owned for public benefit. And so those they go through the redesignation and rezone by you all, and then council approves or doesn't approve. And then when the actual project gets proposed, say it be a courthouse, a fire station, a school, that has to go through the Development Commission. And they look at the site plan, they look at the traffic, they look at the height and the landscaping and the tree planting, and there's an environmental review that goes through and gets sent out to all the agencies, to the state, DOE, everybody. So the environmental review is on the project, it's on the earth moving, it's on the trees coming down. It's not on the policy idea that the color on the map is going to change. It's actually on the effects of the land and air and water from the project. And that information and the site plan and all that work that goes through the Development Commission for their recommendation to the city council, and the elected officials actually make the determination on the project for a school, let's say. The city council makes the decision on that with all the information from the environmental review and the site planning information. Probably there'll be a traffic study. All those pieces and parts go into the approval or disapproval or approval with conditions of the project.
So that includes comprehensive plan change, which I believe is also...
No, comprehensive plan change is you all. That's you all. The comprehensive plan and the zoning is you all. But the actual building and earth moving is the Development Commission and the City Council.
So let me rephrase it.
Okay.
I don't want to keep on beating on this. So in addressing the comprehensive plan change, what we're doing, is it not, are we not to question or to consider upfront at this stage EIS considerations, transportation considerations, environmental considerations? Seems to me there's two separate issues going on.
They are two separate issues. We do, for these sorts of amendments, we do a non-project SEPA review to see if changing, for example, changing the color on the map, the rezone or redesignation, there's not an effect yet until we actually get the proposal, because it could end up, as Tom said, it might go through and the site plan might be completely different than it is now. And so we would have done our review on something that wasn't what it was going to be. So that's why we wait and have the big environmental review on the actual earth moving, trees coming down proposal, and not on changing the color on the map, because it could change. They could go all through it and decide it's not the parcel, or the fire station, as it did, decided it wasn't the parcel. So then we can go back and change the zoning to whatever would be better for the next go around of whoever's going to own it and whoever wants to put something there. But as someone said, it's just the first step of a long process.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
So then I'd like to clarify, given that we're talking about changing it from one designated purpose and intended use to a spectrum of other uses, what are the factors that we should be taking into consideration?
For the rezone and redesignation?
Right. I mean, these are currently set up to accommodate 133 single-family houses, but that's been disallowed for reasons that we're not going to discuss tonight. How do we decide whether a school is the appropriate use for this? How do we decide whether maybe some of it should be retained for open space? How do we handle that conversation?
Right. Well, part of that, and again, there's two different kinds of redesignation and rezones that we get at this juncture for the comprehensive plan. And in the past, I know not all of you have been here, but there have been applicants, developers that have come in and have asked for a change from, let's say, single family to retail commercial. And that's a different category, because it's not a public entity for public benefit. And that's such a narrow focus for the city that it's not that there's different criteria, but there's a lot of criteria that, since it's a public entity to be used for public benefit, there's a lot of boxes to check off that we don't have to check off, because...
It sounds like we're kind of taking it off market. So we're going to see if we can find some high use for public benefit.
Right.
If that doesn't flesh out, then it'll go back in as some other designation.
Correct.
So it's just almost like we're taking it off market almost.
Well, we're
know
taking a
that's
lot
not
of
the
the
right word,
economics out of it, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that one of the criteria is not an economic benefit kind of a thing. That is often what an applicant would have to figure out before they would ask for a redesignation rezone. Is it economically viable for them to even apply for that?
We don't have to do that for
Well, we don't have
purposes
to
of
do
this.
that. No, that's not
Gotcha.
in our purview. And when we've had those discussions, and they're in a different, they're not, of course, in the community facility rezone bucket, but you've had a lot of good discussions on, do we really want that parcel, on that, maybe it's on the outskirts of a residential area. Do we want that to be the start of commercial moving this way into the single family? And they've always been really good discussions because they are actually changing what might happen or what the trend might be if then the next year maybe 3 more parcels on the edge might want to flip to commercial. And so those are sort of policy issues that you all have to recommend on. Whereas this community facilities public ownership for public benefit is sort of a different bucket for you all to think about. You can still decide perhaps that it's not a good place for a courthouse, fire station, school property. I mean, that's totally within your realm to decide that or to recommend that. But it's not the site plan piece that you're worried about yet.
Prior to this packet coming out, I had emailed you guys because I had seen the notification from the city and knew we'd be looking at it. And I was like, I'm going to want a really good justification. I'm going to want to hear nothing about site plan, but I'm going to want to hear from the city, why do you like this property? Why are you requesting to have this? And I didn't see anything in the packet that really directly address that. So while
For which parcel?
For parcels 1, 2, and 3. So I've had the benefit of being on this commission for a while, so I have less questions about I think it's at parcel 11, because it's been dialogued for a long time. However, this, I had emailed you guys. I think that it would be helpful not only to have, again, representation from the school district, but if we actually can have a dialogue with them, of them explaining to us, again, not a site plan, but telling us why this piece of property and really kind of the request. Why do we want to put something that is for the public good to this particular use? I think would help to really bridge what needs to be, what right now is a large chasm. So for me, when I was looking at a lot of the responses coming in all the way up into today, I think a really natural thing is to look at this and look at possibly not doing the rezone on parcel 3. I think it's an interesting idea to limit the request right now and to leave 3 and designate it as open space. I think that's something we should consider talking about, continuing on for the 10th. Another thing that I think we should think about is parcel 5. We're waiting on the other parcels that are adjoining it. I'm not sure why we're addressing 5 right now and putting it as open space, but we're waiting on the other pieces. They're all connected. Why don't we do them all together?
That part I can answer is that King County owns 5, and they've already decided what they want to do with it, and it's to keep it open, and the city was fine with that. The city doesn't know what it wants to do exactly with the other parcels, so they want to do more site planning on those parcels before we rezone to either recreation or open space for the other ones. But King County has made it really clear they want it to be theirs to be open space.
So open space is still on the table for parcels like 6 through.
Well, we haven't
decided at all.
Everything is off the table until we start doing the planning for it.
Okay. Do you right now, was it requested by the school district for 1, 2, and 3 to all be designated the same?
Correct.
And right now, the city doesn't see any difference between treating those parcels differently?
Correct.
Okay. I think it's an interesting dialogue for us to have of looking at splitting some of this designation up for the school district, and I would be very interested to have the school district come and tell us why they want 1, 2, and 3 to all be designated for facilities.
Okay.
Hopefully
We can
that
ask.
will be answered on the 10th.
Any other questions that you all would want us to try to answer by the 10th?
I would like to know if the school district looked at other locations too, and if they
Yes.
did, if they ruled those out, why they ruled those out.
Okay. Oh. I need a different piece of.
And unless you all let me know otherwise, I've already done this with a few people that have emailed me, like Mr. Stoffer. I will put you down as parties of record if you've signed that piece of paper, and I will pass it on to the Development Commission people as well, so that whenever there's a meeting about this, you all will be notified. Okay, so if you don't want to be part of that group, write your name down there and say no, or don't write your name at all, and just let me know.
You want us to sign in or not?
Yes, we want you to sign in, and I think there's a box on there that checks if you want to be, and if it's not checked, I'm going to assume that you want to be on the list, unless you tell me otherwise, because I don't think that was made clear in the beginning.
I think there's an empty sheet of paper, so there should be enough room.
And for parcel 12, you had mentioned that one of the reasons that you were going to, I know, I'm sorry, I know everyone's talking about 1, 2, and 3, but we have a few other ones we're looking at.
It's about all of them.
So for parcel 12, when you done your presentation, you mentioned it was because of the road that you guys were looking at the facilities designation. What is the plan for that?
There's a road there. So
Right.
62nd goes through the southeast corner.
Yeah.
Most of the parcel northwest of that is being used as mitigation for southeast 62nd. But it's all one parcel, and because there's a road on there, it's still CFF.
So there's no way for it to be, I'm trying to think what the middle one is. It wouldn't be open space, but is there,
So
right now for facilities, it would designate it for to be able to no longer be mitigation, right? It wouldn't stay that, it could possibly change based on having that designation of facilities change.
It could, is there something in place that?
Isn't it required mitigation?
Yeah, it's required mitigation.
Okay.
So they can't do anything differently, and it's.
That's what my question was.
Yeah, I can, and I can double check and find out what regulates that to make sure that it stays in place.
Okay.
And I'll do that for next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions that you would like us to try to have answered by the 10th?
Oh, on page 92, I think, we talked about there's the fee for parks, the development fee for parks is still being done for 2019. And so all the stuff in our packet was from like the 2016. It was all old stuff.
Okay, I'm just on the rezone and redesignations.
No, I know. My other question was before we close the meeting.
Well, we have another part of the
we
meeting.
still
We have another presentation.
Okay, good, good. Thank you.
And I have a similar clarification on parcel number 14. I don't think you mentioned that, or maybe you did.
I didn't know.
Given the breadth of the designation, the proposed designation, parcel 14 seems to have it's a very small footprint. It seems to have a very limited, why are you looking to zone that? I think it's,
There?
yeah.
There is, right now, it's proposed for community facilities open space. But the city in 2018 received a King County Conservation Futures Grant for that to help pay for that site.
Okay.
And because of this Futures Grant, there are restrictions on the site already that are kind of open space restrictions. And they limit how much recreation you can do. So the Parks Department didn't want to limit what they could do within that grant. Does that make sense?
No, it
Okay.
does. All right, thank you.
Shall we move on to our next regular business?
Okay.
I appreciate all of you being here.
I have to queue up my thing, don't I?
We're going to go on to amendments to utilities and public service elements. I know there's some questions. If you would put your name on that list and have the staff answer them.
Oh, sure. Let me see.
What?
They're down there.
Thank you. So moving right along into regular business. Chris Trish is going to give us an update on the amendments to utilities and public services.
Yes.
Can we wait until?
Yeah, we're going to wait. Yes.
No, we're still in the middle of a meeting.
We're waiting for you to get out of the way.
Okay. So the comprehensive plan, we amend it annually. We're only allowed to amend it annually.
Can you close?
Am I still too loud? You all looked at the docket, which we call the list of comprehensive plan amendments. You looked at the docket, some of you looked at the docket back in January, and you forwarded it to City Council. Council approved the docket for the first time on February 19th, and then they amended the docket on May 20th. So it's had some review. And then we started actually working on the amendments. And you reviewed the land use element amendments, which are docket items 2 and 3. You did those in July, as well as the transportation element that same night. You looked at the parks element with Parks Department, the goals and policies, also in July. And then tonight, we're looking at the last 2 pieces that are writing, which are the utilities and public services element and the capital facilities element. And of course, we just did the rezone and redesignations. October 10th is the continued public hearing at the Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest by the Holiday Inn. It will be continued, and it will have all the amendments that you've seen and those from tonight, and you will have a lovely big packet to review before that night. Several of the items, as you probably saw in the memo, if you got that far in the packet, several of the items we did not finish, or we chose not to do because there were other pieces moving forward or changing the direction. So there are several items on the original docket that are either moved to future years or that may no longer be necessary. And we can talk about those if you would like to. But from the Growth Management Act, we always have to be really open about which ones didn't move forward so that the public doesn't think that we're trying to bury some amendments that they would really like to see. We have to be really upfront about which ones we weren't able to do. So tonight's purpose in this little section is the utilities and public service element and the capital facilities element. To take public comment if anybody is still here and interested in these 2 elements. And then for you all, and I know Joy already has a question, to give us questions and comments and direction that we can try to have ready for you for the October 10th meeting. I'm going to start with the easy one first. We don't amend this one very often, and we actually thought we were going to amend this with the stormwater plan that's going through, but the stormwater plan isn't done yet, so we weren't going to change anything. But then we found out that the solid waste got changed. We adopted King County's comprehensive solid waste plan, and so I asked Micah, one of our staff, if he would help update the numbers for us. And the good news is we're diverting even more of our waste out of the waste stream, which is super wonderful, 59% now, up from 45% in 2013. So those are the only changes to the element, but I thought they were worth, since we already had this element up to be changed, I thought it was worth it to update this information because it's really good information. Are there any questions on this amendment?
I was assuming that we're still on track for our 80% reduction.
According to Micah, he said we are.
Right.
He's hopeful that we are. Any other?
Yeah, just so I can because they're along the lines of a question that's coming, the various parts of the documents, they're data taken from various different years. So on page 75, it talks about 2016. 59%. Am I to understand now there were 80% diversion?
No, that's policy G3.
Oh,
It's our goal for
Okay.
2050.
So where are we now then? Up above that. However, as of 2016, the city is diverting only about 59% of its total municipal waste. Do you have an update on that?
That's the update that we have. That's the
that
most
is
current,
the
yeah, that's
update.
the most current information. If I knew a more current
You
number,
give us-
that would be the number.
Okay, sorry.
That's as much as Micah knew.
You have a directional sense? Are we heading towards 80%?
That's what Joy's question was, and yes,
Well, I'm sorry.
Micah thinks that we are on track to hit that 80%. The capital facilities element was a little trickier, especially as Joan knows, we haven't updated this one in quite a while, and the reason is we haven't updated our impact and mitigation fees in a while, some of them, and so we didn't want to update this element with old information, and so we didn't. And so the other piece, so back up. So we had some help with our fabulous consultant, and we just finished updating, the council and staff and the consultant just finished updating transportation, fire, impact fees, and police, general government buildings, bicycle and pedestrian, mitigation fees, and I think I'm missing one. Oh, and school is a different track. Those are also impact fees, but they are figured out by the school district, and it's a pass-through from the city. And the reason I'm saying all that probably sounds a little like gobbledygook, is impact fees, which are only transportation, parks, schools, and transportation. Did I say fire? Fire,
Yeah.
did I say fire?
Yeah.
They're a creature of the state. When the Growth Management Act was passed, the state said that the cities and jurisdictions can collect these impact fees, schools, fire, transportation, and parks. There'll be a quiz on this at the end. That we have the authority to collect those under certain strict circumstances. Mitigation fees the city collects. Those are enabled through SEPA. So they're not specifically outlined by the state like impact fees are, but the city has tried to create them and craft them using the rules of impact fees so that they're legally defensible. And so when our consultant looked at this element and saw that we use the term level of service, which is a state word for impact fees that you heard of concurrency for transportation, you've heard of fire as, like calls per minute and, your call time. Our consultant was very uncomfortable that we've been using the term level of service for mitigation fees because they're related to SEPA and they're not exactly the same as how impact fees are done. So part of the update of the capital facilities element, I feel like this is a long path to a little house, part of the changes to the capital facilities element is to try to take out some of the level of service language that was relating to mitigation fees. We kept it for impact fees because that's what they're supposed to be used for. Some of the places we talked about level of service that didn't seem like it would get us into any trouble, we left in. But we tried to be really conscious of not claiming, if you will, that mitigation is the same as an impact fee. And when we get closer in there, you can ask questions if this description hasn't made any sense. But that was one of the biggest changes, is to try to take out the term level of service for things that aren't actually related to impact fees. But there were a few exceptions that we left in. So just saying that, and when we get to the actual places, you can ask me all sorts of questions. The other piece that is a little tricky, I think, is that the parks impact fees are just starting to be updated. The Parks Department wanted to be sure that they had all of their capital projects in the budget and in the capital improvement plan so that we would count all of those in the new impact fee. The other piece of impact fees, because they're supposed to be used to pay for growth, it's growth pays for growth, is the pieces that you need, the capital projects that you need for growth have to be in the capital facilities element in order to charge impact fees for them. So as you saw, the fire station, and then there's fire station debt listed in the new plan. There's the city hall. I think we call it the consolidated city offices are listed in the capital facilities element. So even though that's a mitigation fee, but we're trying to treat it like it's an impact fee. So we have to be sure that those new projects that are to help us deal with growth are in this element, so that we can charge the fees. So the tricky part is, since the parks impact fees are just now being updated with the hope that they're updated by the end of the year, this document is also going to council by the end of the year. So we have to figure out a way to have all the right information in this element in order to be able to update the fees. And I'm talking to our attorney about it to see if our strategy is not only correct but legal. But our idea is that we would strike out all of the parts now that talk about park impact fees and the park level of service and reference the new fees, the new rate study, not knowing exactly what it is yet, but knowing that it will be mathematically done the way the other ones have been. Wanted to at least get you thinking about that, if that's something that you would be comfortable with, or if that's something that you would be totally uncomfortable with. And because if we can't get it into the capital facilities element, then parks fees wouldn't be able to be updated and have a new fee being charged until next year when we amended the capital facilities element. That's sort of the catch-22.
I wish we still had our audience, because I want applause for you. This is exactly what, I like this idea a lot. This is exactly what I was opposed to. So I am a huge proponent of having it be updated to reference the formula for the new impact fees.
And see, we don't have that yet.
I know we don't have that, but I hesitate to pass it along right now. I would like to have that, and I would rather trust, because I know it's in the works. As far as we're seeing it, we need to pass it along to other people to be able to get it through this year. So I like, if the attorney is okay with it, I am a proponent of that, much better than how it is right now.
Right. And the good news, I think from working with the consultant and him and them, talking to the council must have asked many, many times, are these fees calculated to be the highest we are legally allowed to charge applicants? And the answer is yes. We were asked to calculate them as the highest that can be charged, and so that's how the consultant calculated them. And so I'm sure the parks fee will be calculated as the highest that we can legally charge. Council always can adopt a lower fee. They always want to see the higher fee, but in years past, there was one time that they did lower one of the fees. I think it was for general government, which is a low fee anyway, but they're allowed to charge less. They just can't obviously charge more than the legally defensible fee. So that's good to know. I'll let the attorney know that at least.
I mean, that's how I feel. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on this, but.
Certainly you don't have to, tell me yet. You can sort of ponder if that makes sense to you. And you have until October 10th, too, before you see or the week before you would see the draft. But that's sort of the tricky bit of the update of this element. To tell you the truth, it was really fun to get in this element and start cleaning it up. It had been so many years since we did. And speaking of cleaning up, part I didn't clean up was level of service for transportation got better when we updated our concurrency in 2018, and I didn't correct it in your draft. So I wanted to, it'll look like this in the draft that you get October 10th, but we actually have only 5 failures for intersections instead of 6 failures. So that was pretty great. Maybe not as great as our solid waste diversion, but still a positive note. And so it appears that SR 900 Untitled does not fail anymore. So hurrah for our transportation. So this is actually will be a correction that you see in the October 10th draft. Just talking about how we changed, how we talk about level of service. This one's for fire. this one was really great to explain to the council. Instead of having the traditional one fire station per acre or how many, I have to read it because it still makes me kind of laugh. It's the amount of time spent by staff responding to incidents, and then the availability is the time that they're not responding. So once they get to the 90%, that's when they can't get there on time. And so the rate study was really fascinating about how many parking spaces for fire trucks and fire apparatus you need at all the different stations to make sure we don't go below the 90%. So it was a fascinating way to think about fire service, but it did change the level of service. And so I wanted to be able to explain, because when I first heard it, I was like, I didn't quite understand it until it's how available they are versus when they're not available. Are there questions on that?
Just out of curiosity, the 90% rate, where does that come from? What background does study?
From all the studies that we've been doing since we've been doing fire impact fees, is the fire department, they have an amazing, I have to just say this if they're watching, they have an amazing data collection reservoir where they do the calls for service, how far away they are when the calls come in, how long it takes them to, they have data that would just, it's just fascinating. And so they got it down to how many parking spaces in each building and where the apparati are to make sure that they're always above the 90%. And they have, they've got it based on how many people and how many calls per new people at what year that 90% all of a sudden goes to 89. And that's when they are going to need more parking spaces in their fire stations so that it goes back above 90.
And
that's in the rate study that they did.
90% has come from past studies as well. There must be some reason for that, as opposed to 88 or 92.
We're way up from that at this point, but they had a whole progression of, with the growth that's projected in the land use element, how long it will take them to start getting near to the 89, and which is why in the chart we show that when we need this fire station, and then there's an underlying piece of the debt that the impact fees would pay off as well.
And the other thing, Robin, a lot of this data for level of service for transportation and fire and secure police are national entities. This is data that's used across the country.
Just something 90%, that sounds good.
I'm not going to say this specifically, this 90%, but I know that the level of service for fire and traffic and police is pretty much based on national organization studies and presentations.
And that's true. The difference from GMA is that cities and jurisdictions get to choose their own level of service. The data is collected like a level of service C here, or in Sammamish or in Idaho is all the same level of service C, but we can choose to be level of service C, whereas Idaho may want to be level of service A. But the numbers of what level of service C means is the same.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Thank you, yeah.
But it's nice to have more data to rely on than just our little spot of heaven. Are there other questions about fire per se, or?
That was one of my ongoing questions about how fire and police services are calculated, and if they had been, because the last time we talked about it, they hadn't been updated since 1996 or something like that. So I appreciate the fact that they have all the data and they're actually involved in making the judgment calls and what kind of level of service they need.
Right, I think fire was back from 2006. It was one of our older rate studies. So it was really great to get back in and do a new one.
Just a comment here, Trista. It's about numbers. Because the numbers are driven by these assumptions about growth. And so I just compared population charts in various pages through here. And those different charts are used to generate different numbers, but they're impactful. And so if you look on page, for example, 85, at the population growth there from 2013 through 2025 odd, and then compare that to other pages, the numbers are not consistent. And so I started using different tables just to follow through the calculation. And we're talking millions of dollars here in terms of capital budgets and when we cross over from 90 to 88.8 and whatever. So are these numbers constantly updated? I mean, should there not be consistency, for example, at least in the population assumptions?
Right, and I'm assuming, and I haven't looked at them recently, but I'm assuming that they got the numbers from us, and we get our numbers from Office of Financial Management at the state.
Okay, well,
because we try to be really careful that we're all using the same apples.
Okay,
so
well,
that
if you want to just look again, I mean, I don't want to waste your time now, but if you look and compare the charts in these various pages, starting at page 85 and going forward, you'll see that the numbers are different in various years, which are used in the calculations.
Okay.
So I just point that out and say, you know what, probably consistency is not a bad thing.
Well, this ordinance, the little chart that's on page 85, that was already adopted with the rate study for fire, so I couldn't change those, but I can certainly go back and see if, and again, we started,
look at page 91.
we started the fire update in, is it 2019? We started it at the end of 2017, so I'm not sure. I have to look back to see what numbers, or what numbers we were using.
Is there a miscalculation? I don't understand. What's the, you're saying the numbers are wrong?
Saying the population numbers are different
No,
for
where's
each
the
of the
consistency
years.
loss? Where is the consistency loss? I don't understand.
Consistently.
You say they're not consistent. What do you mean?
The population growth.
Okay.
If you look at various pages, the numbers change. So if you,
Robin, I have the same question. Can you give us the pages you're talking about?
Sure, okay, so we start with
So
page
start at
85, so that's that one. And then we go on to page 90, page 90, 2013, for example, on page 90 is not the same as it is on page 85.
Page 90 is really old. Page 90 is from...
Those numbers drive the calculations, don't they? I was trying to follow through.
But those are, the ones on page 90 are going to all be removed because they're from really old.
And these are for level service or parks anyway, right?
Right,
So
that's why they're going to be
They're
removed.
not used for fire.
Because we haven't updated them yet.
Page 91 as well.
Correct. All the park stuff will be removed and updated with the correct population.
So that's the point. Okay, that's fine.
Good question, though, because we do always try to be apples and apples, but...
Trish, I have a 30,000-foot level question.
Sure.
What is the mayor's announcement on Monday about a $5 million deficit or shortfall going to affect, if at all, what this commission does on these kinds of things?
Well,
Are there obviously going to be changes, significant changes? But it's not clear to me, or I don't know if anybody knows at this point, if that's going to have any effect on the data that we get now compared to October 10th or, whatever.
Right. Well, the data that's in the capital facilities element is either from the capital improvement plan, the city's 6-year capital improvement plan that's already been adopted, which has the projects, the capacity projects listed in it, and the rate studies that were adopted September, I want to say the 16th, for traffic, schools, not parks, police, general government, and bike ped. The rate studies and the numbers in there and the capacity projects in the rate study are also what's being referenced. So in the capital facilities element, we haven't referenced the budget, which is what I think you're talking about is the issues with a very tight budget.
Yep.
We're just dealing with the capital improvement program and the rate studies that have been adopted. So we're not talking about actual dollars that might change, but stuff that's already been adopted. That's why the parks part is so tricky, is because there's not any, I don't have any numbers yet for that.
So
but it won't be the budget.
You don't believe that we're going to be doing something in this meeting that will be rendered invalid by decisions that are made
Correct, because I
above
don't,
us or
right,
above
because I
the
don't think we're
council
going
level.
to say, we're not saying that we have to do something within the 6-year capital improvement program.
Okay.
Because that part might be bumped out if we can't do the purchases that we had hoped that we would do.
Fair enough.
A good question, though. That is going to be an interesting
Yes, it is.
budget conversation. Okay, so we go to fire. Police is one of those that's really not a level of service anymore. It's because it's a mitigation fee. And so we're still calling it that it's based on calls per service, including those that have to do with criminal investigations. We want to be sure that people know that there's sort of at least 2 parts of police, and the level of service is related to both of them.
If we state a level of service, do we need numbers that actually say what the level of service is?
No, because we're trying to get away from doing that when it's a mitigation fee, because it's not driven by the state. But we knew that if we didn't talk about level of service for police, that people might think that we aren't providing a service for police, or we don't feel like there's an importance to that. So we didn't want to take it out for fear that people would think, oh my gosh, look at that, they got rid of the level of service. We got rid of the notion that it's that much like an impact fee, which like fire, but we didn't want to not talk about that this level of service are combined with these things. Criminal investigation and calls per service. But you're right, there's no number, there's no 75 calls per service, or there's no total for a year, because it just seemed too limiting when we really, that's really not the level of service for police. And the good news is we're doing so well with police that there's no capacity projects for them, like trucks or cars or motorcycles or buildings in their future. So they're doing really well with meeting the level of service.
Well, yeah, but they're
that in quotes.
taking over second floor, so they're expanding, but just in their current
It's always
facility.
really been there, as we've been.
Yeah.
It's the word when you're somewhere where you're not supposed to be.
Presumably, there is more of a need.
Yes,
They're using that.
they're certainly expanding, and it's good that they can kick people out and no one objects.
Yeah.
So Trish, you're just changing some language.
Correct.
Nomenclature.
Correct.
We're still going to be measuring something that's akin to a level of service. What, are you going to take all the metrics out of these standards?
Just those that are not impact fees. So
There won't
police.
actually be a metric for what level of service police is providing?
Correct. Police has metrics. I mean, police has a bazillion of things that they have to hit, and when they ask for a car or a motorcycle or more room, or all those things, capital things that police ask for, they have their criteria, but it's not of the level of service that we would put in this element, because the part of this element is we need to have the capacity projects that we're charging growth for in this element, and so that's how we talk about it. But the metrics at this point aren't something that we wanted to put in. We were uncomfortable putting it in because it's really not a level of service like it is if it's fire or schools or traffic. It's an odd concept because I've been calling them level of service for 28 years now, and the consultant was like, ooh, you need to be really careful of that because it's really not level of service. It's how well you want your police department to perform.
Standard.
Right.
Standards of performance?
Yeah, it's a
What
performance
is
standard.
Just didn't want to make everybody really confused if we could use the same term but not get in trouble with it being a metric. Does that make sense?
Use some other term.
Well,
Because then there would be level of service, whatever the term that you used, and it might start confusing people. Is it better to have a level of service than a service standard? And we were trying not to go there.
well, what do police departments and other municipalities use for this then? Outside, I understand
Right.
this is a state mandated thing with regard to impact fees, excuse me, and level of service. But there's got to be some I won't say standard, but it would seem to me that there is some semantic definition of so that the public can use
Right.
to determine what they're getting for their tax dollars when it comes to law enforcement.
Right, and I think part of it is how quickly they can do their calls for service, how
response time
quickly
is-
they can
yeah.
do the criminal investigations, all those things that I know the chief has data.
The data exists. That's
Right, but we just didn't know quite how to quantify it in this element, knowing that the purpose of this element is not to be I'm not to be the one that counts if Chief's doing a good job with all of his folks. Our job is to make sure that when they do have a capital need, that it's in this element so that we can charge new growth for it.
And it would also be, also be so that you can see the need before it actually
Exactly,
becomes
the
critical.
6 years before, correct.
Okay.
Any other? Municipal facilities, this one, our consultants just love this one because we cannot find another jurisdiction that charges for this. So they thought we were very innovative. And this one are all the buildings, city buildings, public city buildings that are not police, that are not fire, that are not parks, that we already charge for. These would be the ones that would be like the shop site, like City Hall Northwest, like...
Water treatment.
There's a very small list of public buildings, and the reason, and it's a low fee because there's very few buildings, and the purpose was that the council thought that when we invented this one, that it was just really helpful that the public could have a place to come in and get their passports and get their utility bill paid and all those things. And they thought that that was a service that we provided. So they wanted some help that when we grew and we needed more buildings, that we would be able to have a little bucket of money to help with that growth, the needs for growth. A really cool discussion came up at the council committee meeting, and that was the future of government providing services is not always going to be brick and mortar. You know, we're going to pay our utility bills online. What can we someday pay for? A great website connecting link thing that you can pay, you know, you can be more responsive to the public but not have them come into a building. And our consultant thought that was a fabulous idea, but that's not how we calculated. That wasn't the format we used. But we're completely fired up about the next time we update this in whatever 3 to 5 years to think more futuristic about government services and maybe, you know, a computer program to be a better interface with folks to help them with their services so they don't have to come to City Hall. Would be a really cool way to put that together. So we didn't get to do that this time, but they were certainly excited about in the future going beyond just brick and mortar. And the consolidated city offices are in the capital improvement program, partly in the 6 years and then partly in future years. So that little table is in the capital facility element to show that we could charge for those. Charge new growth to help us pay for that consolidated city office in the future. Any questions on municipal facilities? Okay. We talked about this one already, parks impact fees, and I'll let you know if the attorney likes our idea or if we have to go back to the drawing board, but that would be the parks element. The map, the only change on the map, it's hard to cross out the old map, but it has a big X, and the only change for the new map is that the old map has a little star and says future school administration offices, and the new map actually has it without a star saying school administrative offices, and those are in the area up, the building up by FedEx, up by Brown Bear and what's at the corner?
Microsoft is
the
also
old
the-
Apple,
like
the old
Costco and Microsoft
Albertsons,
offices.
Value Village. It's the old, what was it? It used to be Siemens, I think. So that's the only change on the map as well. So next steps, as you know, there's another public hearing, the continuation on October 10th. the Pickering Room, City Hall Northwest by the Holiday Inn. I'm going to say that 100 times. And then if all goes well, we can be at the study session November 12th with no action from the council. And then the council meeting on December 2nd, they may take action if they would like. Are there questions about any and all of this fascinating information?
I think we have to make sure that Ron knows where to go. He got lost the last time.
I'm sure it's, I have to actually post the door. I'm not sure how many people will look at a posting on the door, but I have to post the door when we leave that it's been continued and where the future meeting is. And we'll put it on the website, but I have a feeling a lot of people are going to come here that night, and I think the debate is going to be here, which is why we got bumped to be in the Pickering Room, is the debate, the election debate, I think is supposed to be in here that night. Either that night or the night before. They kind of blocked out the whole week here.
Trish, can the Pickering Room accommodate the number of people that showed up here?
Yes, we'll have to reconfigure the chairs. We won't have you all in a nice big U like typical, but I'm trying to remember which one were we in that had a lot of people in it. Because I remember we were, first we had our backs to the crowd and we switched the seats around, so.
Yeah, when we did, when we were
didn't feel
talking
like we were
about,
on a
when we
train.
rezoned, when we were talking about changing the designation for like where Old Town meets up with
Right.
Gilman. And
Destination retail, you're right. Good memory, 10 points. But yeah, there was a lot of people there, and it was really a cozy discussion too, because the cameras and microphones aren't so obvious. And so people just start talking, which I suppose is good and bad. But I remember that was a really cozy conversation with the property owners.
You mentioned a couple of times regarding the rezoning of the Province Point, that emphasizing this is a public good. This is and the question was, how do we think about this? And that was a great way of putting it. Is there some list of criteria that you could send, at least to me, that might help me differentiate how I should think about a property that's being contemplated to be rezoned for a public good and one that's contemplated to be rezoned for your commercial or whatever it is, your money-making operation, if you will. Is there something that...
Yes, there are criteria for the other kind. Sure, sure.
At least to me, I may be the only one that's interested.
You know, and it's one of the criteria, to me, the most famous one is that if the rezone adds housing, population, because we've already met our growth targets, people kept asking the council for rezones, for upzones, and so the council changed the code, well, with your help, it had to go through you all first, that said that if we've already met our growth targets and the rezone would add capacity for housing, that it was a denial because they weren't interested in upzoning to get more units when we'd already met our state growth targets. So that was actually a criteria, and so someone would come in and say, I want to rezone my land from single-family duplex to multifamily high. We'd say, this criteria, you don't meet it, so we would have to say no. We couldn't approve it because you don't meet the criteria.
That would be very helpful, that synopsis from me.
So, Trish, I've also, this is 30,000-foot level, but I've heard that there's talk that the city is going to look at the benefits of shifting from increasing the number of homes in Issaquah to really focusing on getting more jobs. Have you heard that?
I've heard, well, I guess in the October 10th packet, and you may remember this from July, our housing target, we're getting to our housing target faster than we're getting to our job target. Not that we're behind in the job target, we're just not almost there yet like we are with the housing target. And so I think that's made some folks think that maybe we should try to jumpstart the job creation, which is, a lot of that's the market. It's like, how do you change a hot housing market to make a hot commercial job market? I mean, it's not always up to us. But I think there's the thought that, is there something we should be doing to get the jobs flowing?
And that, to me, is the essence of what we do here, is something that significant is, I believe, part of what we ought to be looking at when it comes to our recommendations to the mayor. And I know it was in, we've already started to discuss it, it's in the public documents, but boy, that's a big deal. If we're considering a seismic shift like that, then, I think this commission's got some work ahead of us.
And when we responded to Puget Sound Regional Council with their Vision 2050 plan, one of the questions was, given all of our neighbors and how everyone's meeting or not meeting their growth, housing, or job targets, does that get taken into consideration when we get the next group? Do we get some grace on ours because we've done so well? We're like the A+ student versus maybe some of our neighbors haven't been so great at it. Again, a lot of it's market. It's not just because we're so popular, but we're popular. And so PSRC's response was that negotiation is between you and the county. PSRC will be sitting at the table with us, but they're not actually advocating that Issaquah did really well, you ought to give them a break on their next housing target, or whatever it is we want them to support us on. And we just hit really hard that we've been, you should be supporting those jurisdictions that are really doing well so that we don't have to, because it's not only the growth, it's the infrastructure that goes with it. It's the schools that you heard tonight. It's the parks. It's all the things that go with police and fire. It's not just those housing and job numbers. So we'll see how that goes with PSRC and with King County when we start to negotiate with King County.
And when does that negotiation with the county start?
The second set of, they don't call it buildable lands anymore, so I have to remember the new name. It's like growth capacity project, but I always say, which used to be buildable lands. And that's something, Kristen, I shouldn't have let her leave, but that's something that she does, is she figures out that all the remaining capacity on the land, on our land, sends it to PSRC and the county sees, makes sure that it fits with what data they have, and then they can tell how much capacity we have left, and then you start negotiating around the table with all the jurisdictions. Sammamish might have this much left, North Bend might have this, and King County has their bucket. They say, we have this many houses and jobs, let's go. And we all, start to say, well, I'll take 5, but I won't take 10. And it just starts to go like that. And we're supposed to have them all negotiated, I think, by the end of next year.
So then we have this issue that came up to date, where we've got a plot of land that's currently oriented toward future housing, and we're talking about reorienting toward totally, really what would almost be a job creation, because it's going to be an employer, a school. To me, that if we're going to reorient towards supporting jobs, then I think having something out of sync, like we have those 2 criteria for us, reorienting toward job creation makes sense. That's one criteria that we might take into consideration when we're evaluating this rezone.
Well, and again, though,
we don't need it for housing.
Right. Well, and I can't imagine that any community facilities rezone would add housing unless it's something like the city owning a place and we're going to build affordable housing or something like that.
It's already set up to be housing. That's its default purpose right now.
Right. And I'm hoping that when, on the 10th, that the school district comes in, I've heard several of the administrators talk about how many sites they looked at and they lost, either the price was too high, the location, they went through, it's been 3 years, at least 3 years since the bond, and nothing's under construction yet.
They have a strong argument to make, they just need to make it.
And I would absolutely second that. I thought maybe when he started speaking, he was going to bring that up, because I think that's
I was hoping that he would.
Maybe the critical issue, and that's what land is available in the Issaquah School District territory.
Right.
And that data is pretty compelling, as I understand it.
Right.
It is, but at the same time, the school district is known for the fact that time and time again, they get exemption after exemption, and they build what they want, and they do what they want. And so it's important to lay a foundation where we say, within our purview, this is how we're going to direct it. And I don't know that just because we know we need schools and we know that there is not an abundant spaces of land, that doesn't mean that we need to blanketly say all sites go right ahead.
Well, I don't disagree with your premise that there has been significant discussion about the way Issaquah School District has proceeded with its project. I tell you, the Development Commission presided over some meetings where there was some very significant neighborhood concerns and meetings plural over different aspects of it. So that's absolutely a legitimate issue. I just think that the driver is where can they build?
Right. And the good news, since Randy, since you've looked at schools and the school projects, is the PPC has changed the code. And I know these won't be compact schools because we had promised that the new code wouldn't affect the bond schools because they only appropriated how much money for the 2016 bond schools. So then we have 2 code amendments that you all did with some help from council. But part of them was just to make them the less footprint schools, that these will have to be the ones, the next wave of bond schools. Sounds like Bond from the movie, but no, school bond schools. And then the next group, when they do a new bond, whenever that is, those will have to be compact schools, and those I'm hoping will go in Central.
And
they will be compact and tall.
And the resonant thing in this discussion, whether it's the zoning or whatever, when it regards the school, is in those meetings of the Development Commission, that where they came in with the initial meeting and then the public hearings and all that, the Development Commission spent, those meetings were more than 50% of the meeting time was not talked about the environmental impact, it was not talked about the architecture, it was talking about student parking. And the drop-off pickup parking, which, it's not our purview, but talk about room for improvement.
Yeah, that's still a big issue.
Yep.
Okay, with that, I think that you have valid questions, and you probably could go on for a long time. So, but I'm looking at the clock, and it's 10 to 9, and I think that the 10th is going to be coming up pretty soon. So I'm going to call the meeting.
Okay, so for this topic, the 2 elements, utilities and capital facilities, the only question I have to get to you before the 10th is the rezone criteria, which is actually the community facilities topic. So there's nothing else you want me to research or do on these other than take all the stuff out of parks? Anything else you want to know or have done by the 10th?
I think you told me, it's a question that my questions about inconsistency of numbers, which drives, those are irrelevant in the sense that they will be made consistent.
If the ones that were inconsistent were the parks numbers, then yes, those will change.
I'll spend a couple of minutes with you. We can go through it afterwards if you want, because I'm confused about your answer there.
Well, they won't change. You're just removing them.
I'm removing them because they're old, yes.
Right, so the numbers were there. They were not struck through as they should have been.
Okay.
They were inconsistent because they're old numbers and they're invalid. They're not numbers to keep in there. They're being pulled out. When we looked at this tonight, there should have been strike-throughs to that whole section.
I see. Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that.
No, that's okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill, for translating. It always helps. I like that Christopher was a translator for the names on the list. I thought that was fabulous.
So do you have any other updates?
The only other question I have is on this famous October 10th night. I have the RSVPs, and I know I don't get Randy at all in October, and I don't have anything listed for Joy. October 10th?
I'm going to do my best to be here on the 10th.
Okay. So I'm going to put a yes and a question mark. And Tom?
No.
No? Okay. And I don't have anything for Robin.
Yeah, sure.
Yes? Okay. So then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a quorum. So that's awesome. And I will be sending you out reminders that it's in the Pickering room, City Hall Northwest, by the Holiday Inn, October 10th, 6:30.
Save me a parking spot.
Yeah, oh, there's plenty of free parking, free parking. Excellent. Well done, you all. Well done.
Call the meeting at 8, I don't know. 53, something like that.
Yeah, that works.
So